Are you feeling stifled, worn out, or just bored with your 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 job? I want you to know that you're not alone. I was there too till I started asking and wondering if there was another way to live and work where I could actually be more of me. In this episode, I bring to you real conversations with real people who have chosen to step out of their 9 to 5 employment and create a life for themselves that is more in line with their inner rhythm. Good morning, Sanjay. Thank you for agreeing to be our guest on this show, Beyond 9 to 5, and would love to get started right away. I know you, but our guests don't. So perhaps you could start by telling us about your life many years ago now when you were actually in a 9 to 5 job. Tell us about what you were doing, what your role was, and what was the first time that you got this thought or possibility or idea that, hey, you could be doing something outside of this employed thing?
Thank you for having me, Ramya. And the first thing I would say is that it wasn't a 9 to 5, it was a 9 to 9. And some and sometimes that 9 to 9 was 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. also, given time zone differences. So yeah, I stepped out of a job, an employment about 15 years back. But before that, I spent 15 years doing business roles in corporations. Uh, I am an engineer and MBA by qualification, educational qualification. Went on to do work with a consumer products company first, and then eventually went to business consulting, where I worked on product market strategy, business process reengineering projects. Eventually went into the IT industry in late 99, early 2000. Went into uh, business development and a sales role with the IT services company. As you may recall, this was the time when IT boom had just started. India had started appearing on the outsourcing map. So I spent about 6 years of my last 6 years of my corporate life helping build businesses, outsourcing businesses. And I lived in the US and India during that time to do that. So yeah, that's what I was doing before I decided to uh, make a move out of what you said, 9 to 5 or 9 to 9.
So, Sanjay, it must have been good times, right? I mean, living in India and the US, IT segment booming, you're in a power seat. Uh, what was the trigger to step out of that?
Uh, that's an interesting question, Ramya, because I can't remember there being like a particular point in time where I woke up one day and say, no, I need to do something different. So here's what happened. Uh, so obviously, like all of us, not only there was a work life, there was a life at home as well. And when I took a decision to move to the US after having spent time in business consulting here, I literally arrived in the US with 6 suitcases, two each for myself, my then wife, and my 6-month-old child. And we started our life anew there. And there was a lot of excitement of uh, new country, new kind of work. I had never, I mean, I was quite scared of doing a sales role, and and in a different country, and all the colonial heritage of the selling to the white man and all of that was still hanging in my head as well. So there was a power kick of doing that, yeah, and I remember that me and my colleagues at that point of time would literally during, you know, smoke breaks or coffee breaks would be standing there and literally have conversations. This is early 2000s, like we are changing India, and it did feel like that. The outsourcing industry was on an upswing. The company that I worked with, Infosys, was growing 40-50% a year. And to contribute to that growth and to be able to make a difference to the fortunes of not only myself, but so many other people, software engineers who were coming there, the company growing so heavily, and the image that it projected out to the world of India awake, India rising kind of a thing was very, very high. I did enjoy those 6 years a lot, and I'm thankful for all that it gave me. It's about 4 years into that work, the other life, which the life out of that work, I could see that was having immense amount of impact on personal life. The kind of hours it took, the kind of dedication it took to build something like this would keep me away from my family, would keep me away from myself. I started realizing that I had very little time and energy to do things for myself. um, I would, when I moved to India, which for the last 1.5 years, I worked in India while handling a global portfolio. My day would start at 6 in the morning and would never end before 11 in the night. Um, and so there was this churn inside, there was this restlessness inside, saying there's so much achievement. I have ticked off all the boxes that my parents told me to do, the society tells you to do. Went to some of the best colleges, worked for the best brand names, but there wasn't any sense of fulfillment inside. There was a sense of actually being, this is not who I am. I felt like I was going more and more away from myself rather than becoming myself.
Wow,
So
Sanjay, that's so insightful what you just took us through, right? The ticking of all the boxes, the right boxes, the many boxes, everything that we've been told that this is what it takes to succeed, and then still feeling that, but you're not ticking off that box of being you inside. And I remember you telling us about a story once about, I think maybe it was Antakshari or sometime when people in your company was singing and you sang. Do you want to tell that story? Because it perhaps that wasn't one moment, but that might have been one of many moments where what I found beautifully was you realized that there was a part of you that wasn't apparently showing up or expressing itself in your life, that life.
sure. So let me share that story and another one which is coming to my mind right now, which may look like triggers as well. Yeah, I mean, those were not so much triggers, but as the last straw, if I may call them. So this was my last year at in the job, and I was heading a business unit, built, and had charge of building a new business. I was given a 800, 900 people team, which had become a market facing team. So I had to, the board had given me a mandate to build this business further. So it was very exciting from, if you look from the outside, that here I was being trusted by the board because of my track record, given yet another business to build. And uh, uh, so I in that process I helped. Uh, I was trying to build the people function a lot because the people function had been quite ignored for this unit in some way. And in that process, one of my HR partners, she created a Antakshari to just have fun on a week. When my team was uh, in a room, I just happened to pass by the room while the Antakshari was going on, and me being a lover of music and me also being somebody who used to play Antakshari way back in college, got pulled in. I said, let me just spend a few minutes here. And in that very moment, the person who was conducting it played the opening notes of a song, Hindi song, and he said, "Can you guess which song it is?" And none of the teams could do that, and nobody in the audience could do that. And I just put up my hand, and they were quite surprised that the head of their unit here and all the hierarchy authority kind of operating like that, right? And they were quite excited about it. And I just sang. I just sang very spontaneously. And the response I got from the audience just moved me so much, because it felt like it wasn't coming only from the fact that I was the business unit head, etc., etc. But it just felt like they saw humanness in me. And that was the moment I was like, where am I seeing the humanness in myself? I've just become a bundle of roles.
Sanjay, I'm hearing this, I'm getting goosebumps all over and tears in my eyes. And I've heard this story before, but it's so powerful because it's like music and you, and not just the fact that you're a good singer, but that whole idea of being you, which is so much more. And I say you, but this is for everyone listening out there. Like, each one of us is so much more than our roles can accommodate. And just the acknowledgement that these roles have not, been able to hold and deliver all of you, and the response that people had when they could see
Yeah.
the you stepping out. But please go on. Just
Whew. Yeah. I went back to that moment, and it's always overwhelming for me to get back in touch with that. The second moment I want to share with you, as you asked, Ramya, is I remember my oldest, she's 22 now, and at that moment she was maybe 6 or 7 year old. And I told you just now that my day would be 6 to 11. So I would come home at 6, 7 in the evening, and my calls will continue. And the 22-year-old still tells me, "Yeah, I remember those times when you would be there." And I was sitting on a sofa and spending, just started doing something with her. She was a 6, 7 year old, obviously excited to show me something that she had done at school or something like that. And I started doing it, and the phone interrupted yet again. And I said, I just put the person on pause for a moment, and I told her, "Look, I need to take this call. I'll play with you right after this." And I have this image still imprinted in my mind, Ramya, of the 6 year old walking away from me, really angry, and saying, "You never have time for me." I think even right now, I can feel that when my heart broke at that moment, I was like, what the hell am I doing this for? Why, somebody I love to bits. She's my first child, that she made me father. I am a very, very hands-on father. I mean, that's a role that I enjoy so much over everything else. Any other role in life comes secondary. And I'm like, if I'm not able to do justice to this role, that's what started my quest for
wow.
yeah.
Thank you,
So that's
Sanjay.
what started my quest.
Yeah. Thank you for taking us through photo stories, powerful moments, and very relatable, because a lot of people go through that. And, heart wrenching as these times are, a lot of times, what we do is we just say, okay, fine. Yes, this role is not letting me be the father that I want to be. It's not letting me be all of me. And yet it's okay, I will compromise. It's still giving the money. It's still helping me, have a living. It's giving me the power. It's giving me, all the some other things. And in order to create something outside of that, I have to say bye-bye. I have to give up some of these things. And that giving up, that saying bye-bye, that taking a cut sometimes, or that's not easy. The other thing is, it's also scary, because you were 15 years into the industry. You're the boss. You have a proven track record. You have people listening to you. And now if you step out of all of that, you're going to be like starting all over again. So what were your fears, doubts, anxieties, and how did you start that transition?
You know, more than what was going to happen in my outside world, career, money, and family, etc. I think what bothered me more is my inner journey. Uh, so the last 1.5 years that I spent in the corporate world before I decided to actually leave it were quite excruciating for me. There were nights when I wouldn't be able to sleep. There would be a lot of restlessness. I would have bouts of anger with, which seemed disproportionate with people around me at work, at home, with my child, with my wife, with my boss, uh, colleagues. And I would blame them for my condition of the feeling that the way I was feeling, which was very overwhelmed and very irritated and angry most of the time. That would give me momentary relief, but it would not give me any resolution. Uh, so because next day the feelings would return. Next day, yet another incident would somebody happen, and I would go through. So it felt like a very futile, cycle I was stuck in. And in some ways, it was good to go through that journey, Ramya, I think, because that's the journey that made me realize that I can keep blaming anybody and everybody around me, but that still doesn't help me with myself, right? So, and it really made me much more confident about my decision to disengage with the context and truly and completely go in search of who am I and what are my desires. And
Wow, Sanjay, you just said something very profound. So I just have to repeat this here for myself
yeah,
and all the viewers, really about disengaging from the context and getting into the journey of who you are. Because yeah, it's so easy to blame the context, isn't it? It's so easy. We're so good at it, the critical analysis. This is wrong, this is
yeah,
wrong, this is wrong. But it's way more difficult, but to look into, what you talked about, what is the cause of this restlessness, what are my desires, what do I really want, who am I. But that's where the goal lies. That's where
yeah.
the discovery, that's where the playground opens up. But where did you
Yeah.
go from there then?
Yeah, so the two things that happened like almost simultaneously, or at least with some overlap. One is I made a decision to leave the corporate world, disengage from the context, spend time with myself, etc. The second thing that happened is Ramya, that I have definitely come to believe that the cliche, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. The more I wanted to answer this question of who am I and what do I want, the more people and resources just kept popping up. Somebody would connect me to somebody. I would have a conversation about what I'm going through with someone, and hey, I know somebody, and why don't you go and talk to her or talk to him? And that's really how it
I'm
started.
sure there would have been more than one, but do you remember, or do you want to tell us about any one or two such, conversations or mentors or people who entered your life, and what was their gift to you?
Sure. So the last year in Infosys, I took over a business to run, as I was sharing earlier, where there was a lot of focus on building the team, building the business, and the human aspect, as I was sharing with you, was ignored for this team earlier. So one of the interventions that my learning partner for my business unit was there, and I said, look, I want to do this. So he suggested somebody from the outside, somebody who does the kind of work that I do today, and she and her team were engaged by Infosys in some capacities earlier, and said, look, given the challenge you're having, I think this would be a good person. Why don't you talk to her? And so appeared in my life my mentor, my friend, my protector, whatever you want to call her, Sushma, who used to run, still runs a boutique consulting firm called Resonate Consulting. And she and her team came and did work for me and my team at that point of time. And I remember this was in Mysore campus of Infosys, and we are walking back from the workshop on one of the days. It was a 3-4 day workshop, and I think on the last day I said I want to have walk back to the dinner area with you and a longish walk. And on the walk there, I told her, saying, "Look, I've decided to leave this world, but I find what you're doing is what I may want to do, and this sounds looks very attractive. Can I work with you?" And she was so surprised, like out of the blue. and we still laugh about that incident. By the way, Sushma and I ended up working together for 8 years after that. But that conversation remains very vivid in our mind, because she shared later on that how she was shocked and like, what the hell will this guy do come and do with me? And she said that, but you asked one question that made it very easy for me. So I could see that, shock and indecision on her face. And I simply asked her, saying, "But do I look trainable?"
Wow. Wow.
Uh, and she said, "Yeah, that you do." And she said that's what changed it for me, because I saw somebody who was willing to learn. And then we went on to create some very beautiful moments for not only ourselves, but our clients for 8 years.
Sanjay, I'm going to pick up on that willingness to learn, right? Because that is so key to doing anything that you want to do beyond what you're already doing. So if you're looking at creating a life beyond 9 to 5 for ourselves,
Yeah.
how important is willingness to learn? I would put it on a 10 to 10, 10 on 10. But take us through your journey from then to what you're doing right now. And, let's go through it with that willingness to learn. So tell us about all the lovely things that you learned and the challenges and adventures and, and where it's brought you and what you do today. And a slice of your life today, what it looks like.
Yeah, so given the singing story that I shared with you, the first thing I did was I started singing a lot. At the moment I got it. Yeah.
And was that also part of what you mentioned as spending more time with yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And investing in myself in different ways. I mean, for a good, when I left, I was 37. So, so a good 20 years of education and corporate career, etc., 20 plus years. And so I had invested in a certain way. So one of the things I did was theater is something that I used to do a lot at college. So about 6 months after leaving, I joined a theater group and trained myself in a new theater methodology called playback theater.
Wow. So reconnecting with those parts of you that you seem to have left behind and bringing them back
claiming
completely and living through them. That's so amazing.
Absolutely. I was like, that Sanjay is not going anywhere. That's coming back. And that connected me to some. So I remember I used to do it in a college. The college kind of hosted that course and anybody could join in. So here I was, a 37-year-old, and the next youngest person was a 24-year-old software engineer, and the rest, all of them were college students who were between the ages of 17 to 20. It was such fun to go work with all of them and learn all over.
Let me echo that back on the learnability, trainability, learning mindset, and not letting age come in the way of that at all. Right? It has nothing to do with age. And that's so beautiful.
So that 3 months of training and getting up at 6, this course used to be at 6 in the morning. I remember. So 3 months were like really magical to learn all of that. The third thing, as I said, is I paid attention to all the advice that I got. All the advice, right? In the sense of just like go and meet.
I'm going to ask you some tough questions here because isn't it risky and scary to pay advice to pay attention to all the advice? Because it reminds me of that story of, the father and son taking a donkey to the market to sell, where, people give us all kinds of advice. How did that work for you?
So maybe in my enthusiasm, I used the word all, but it wasn't all about everything, but definitely any advice that came my way that told me saying I had made a wrong decision about the past was ignored.
Okay, lovely. So you did ignore the judgments and the what about the people who came your way and said, Sanjay, are you sure you're making the right thing? And what if you could fail? And why are you giving up all these things? Did you ignore them as well?
Yes, I stayed silent, smiled back at them, and said, deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of it came, especially my parents, right?
Yeah,
Because they invested their lifetime and a lot of a lot of themselves
yeah,
into
yeah.
giving us education. My dad was a railway officer, not, not, and my mom was a homemaker. So they have lived with a lot of financial insecurity, etc., all their lives. So to see somebody
They were
who's
like
at the,
stakeholders in your life.
yeah,
Right?
life, yeah, that's so much predictability going away. My
How did,
wife,
how did you, your wife's absolutely spouse, how did you deal with that?
yeah. So I think by 37, my parents had given up on me in a bit of like that. ये वही करेगा जो इसे करना है type, you know. So I have been a bit of a rebel. I call myself a covert rebel, not an overt one. That I would satisfy the system to a certain extent, and then I would do my own thing. So I had learned that saying like, आपने जो कहा था वो सब कर दिया ना. What are the boxes you wanted me to take? I've ticked. Now
Okay.
let me do my own thing.
Nice.
With my wife, it was a little more challenging because uh, two kids at that point of time, she herself exploring her own career options, etc. Because she, after taking a break from for children, she wanted to get back to work, and she is very accomplished and talented in her field as well. So she also wanted to. So the way I took care of that was to say, look, here's enough for us for the next 2 3 years. Even if I don't earn anything, we can still maintain our lifestyle, and I'm sure within 3 years I'll be able to figure out what else to do. um, so I think that helped, that taking care of her anxiety, literally doing the numbers on an Excel sheet and showing her, this is how it will work.
That's very important actually, and very good. Yeah, I hope people listening can, take some tips from that as well. Actually, putting the numbers down and saying, okay, basic
Yeah,
security is going to be taken care of, and defining that for
absolutely.
yourself.
Absolutely. And putting away a certain amount of money that was not to be touched for children's education, saying, look, this is something that will keep going in. We will not touch this. And yet we will be able to take care of, what we have to. Uh,
But there
like,
are other fears, Sanjay, apart from the money, like fear of failure or fear of, getting back into the level of recognition that you had created through your earlier career.
hmm.
The status.
uh, yeah. Honestly, that didn't bother me, Ramya, so much because I guess that's who I am. That I have always been somebody who uh, enjoys the process of creation rather than process of running large businesses or building big stuff kind of a thing. I'm happy taking something small and an idea or a team, uh, and making it viable and value adding for people, a happy place to work. Those are the things that I have valued always. So the status thing didn't bother me so much. There's a very funny small story maybe I'll share with you, that the very last conference I attended before leaving Infosys, this was just 20 days before I actually my last working day, and I traveled in the a train back with a colleague who had joined exactly the same day I did in the US, and we had actually spent time together in the training as the salesperson. And so it was kind of interesting that the person you joined with on the first day, and you're leaving and you're again on a journey with the same person. And so we were talking about, so he was like, you know uh, brave decision, you've done this, that. And he said, okay, let's do the maths. How is it that you are able to do this? And then I told him that, here's the maths of it, and here's how I think about it, etc., etc. And then he said, "Oh, acha, but if I come back to India, if I do this is the kind of school I would like to send my kids to. This is the kind of house I would like to buy, and this and that." And he did the maths, and he came up with a number that was 8 or 9 times my net worth at that point of time.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, uh, that is the indication of the fears you carry. So for me, these conversations helped me clarify for me, not judging for who he was, but
Yeah,
clarified for me that,
you
look,
need it.
this is who I am. I am okay with this.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that, because that's so important. I mean, everybody would have to do that at some point when they're looking at such a shift. And this is so good to know. So, what about fear of failure?
Oh yeah. So yet another story. uh, so yeah, when I left the work that I was doing, obviously there's a certain credibility, etc., that I had because of that, and I got referred for a consulting assignment to yet another mid-sized IT company, and they said, "Look, the CEO talked to me. He said, I've been referred to you by your ex-boss, and he talks highly of you. Why don't you come and help us, etc., etc." So here I was, and went in to do my first consulting assignment outside that on my own. And the most interesting thing was that the CEO of I was supposed to meet the CEO with the findings of all that was happening. It was a organization and sales effectiveness kind of improvement project. I did gathered a lot of data from all his team and all of that, and I was supposed to meet him a day before we were supposed to present it to the entire leadership team. And he backed out of it last moment because he said, "Look, I mean, he used to live in US. He said, I have come here to India for many other things. So why don't you just go ahead and present it tomorrow to the leadership team?" I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yeah, yeah, I trust you when you do that." Next morning, I start presenting, and within 30 minutes of it, I can see he's restless, there's irritation on his face, etc. And he literally asked us to saying and asked me to say, "Can you leave the room for a few minutes?" So bang, the very first assignment, the failure. And then he called us back in 20 minutes later and said, and basically later on, I got to learn that he's the founder and the CEO. So the way I offered the feedback, it almost felt like to him saying that I'm calling his child ugly, and it didn't land very well. So he basically told his leadership team saying, "Look, here's somebody who's calling out, calling your company bad and all of that, and you guys are just colluding with it, and just saying this." Because those are the guys who were actually suffering, and they found a platform to talk about it, right? So I tasted failure right in my first assignment. And that really made me question, is this the work that I want to do? Can I do, etc.? And uh, but I think what it led me to, Ramya, is to go back to the thing that we talked about, because for me it has always been about that failure has always meant to me saying, "Hey, go, you need to learn something more."
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so just a chance to learn more and to thank you so much. And thank you for sharing that story that, there will be, then there can be such failures. And what you can do out of it is learn and move on, upgrade
Yeah.
and work on. So I'm going to
Let me
fast.
add one more.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
add one more thing. It's not only a training. I think the other thing is willingness to ask for help.
Ask for help. Yeah, yeah.
I was shattered after this chat, and I went to Sushma, who's obviously very experienced, etc., the mentor that I talked about. And she shared her perspective and she encouraged me, saying, look, go and have a conversation back with him and tell him how you're feeling.
Wow.
It was completely new to me because I was like, somebody
I
who's
can imagine
insulted
you
me and
just
all of that, right?
asked.
How do I go back to him and do that? And that was such a valuable lesson for me, Ramya. I still remember that because what I learned at that moment is that conflicts are actually a place to transform relationships. And that's what happened. I went to him, told him exactly how I felt, and he was so apologetic after that. That assignment, by the way, didn't go anywhere very much. But because I had that conversation with him and my upfront authenticity, he called me back for two other assignments later.
Wow. So putting that in bold and italics, right? Conflict is, can we repeat that? Is a birthing ground for transformation,
For transforming relationships.
for transforming relations. Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's such a nice gem you just gave us. And I'm going to fast forward you now to what you do now today. And tell us about your work, tell us about your life, tell us about you, how you express yourself through everything that you do and engage with. And just if I may, offer a framework, you could use it if you'd like to. It's one of my favorites. It's called return on time invested. So if you look at the time that you're investing in what the things that you do, what are the ways in which you look at the return? So there's money, there's satisfaction, there's the learning, there's enjoyment, creativity for you, like you said, the joy of growing things. So how does it look like today?
Let me start by saying that my biggest metric of success for me is, am I being myself?
Lovely.
You remember I started by asking the question, who am
Yes.
I? So I sleep easy because I give myself space to always ask myself that question. And if I'm not being myself, to ask, why am I not being myself? And I have gained perspective, knowledge, help, support systems that always keep me on that track. And to me, all of these are signs of this is me, this is the way, this is the return that I always wanted. Uh,
Wow. Am I being myself? Full stop. Amen. And I love that.
yeah, because I remember like about 5, 6 years into the journey, one of my ex-colleagues happened to come by from UK, and we were having dinner together, and he was like, what do you enjoy about the work that you do now? And I was like, my spontaneous answer was, I have to leave no part of myself at home.
Beautiful. So, as a coach, as a facilitator in the consulting that you do, what's most important to you is, am I being myself? Am I bringing all of me to be present? I love that, Sanjay. And I've experienced some of the ways in which you've held space for others to be themselves. And now I understand where it's coming from, because at your core is the question, am I being myself? And in that, you give permission for others to be themselves and to bloom, grow, and transform. Lovely. So as we I could go on talking with you, this, but as we bring this to a close, I'm going to ask you to, leave our audience with what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for anyone who's considering moving out of a 9 to 5 and exploring the world on their own. And by 9 to 5, I just mean a safe, secure, employed job.
Sure. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's like boiling it down to three is where I'm struggling with. But you know that I run a public program called Take Two, which is about helping people make transitions like this, and which actually came out of my life journey and my partner Amit's life journey. Um, so we, of course, have a lot of stuff in there in a very structured and semi-structured way to help people make those transitions. But if I were to look at my own life journey, the 2, 3 things that have helped me. By the way, I did make a video about it also when I
And we'll
when
put
I
a
crossed
link
the
to that in the description to the program as well as to where people can find.
Oh, thank you.
We'll
Thank
do
you.
that in the description.
That'll be helpful. Yeah. So I made a video about my 15 years outside the corporation,
Mhm.
and I talked about that at every stage there are temptations, and then what do you honor?
What do
So
you
at
honor?
every moment, yeah, as you make shifts of this kind, there will be kinds of temptation, like you said, right? Was there fear of failure? Was this about status? It may be about money, right? So that's a temptation to go back to the comfort zone of all of that. And yet I had to honor that voice within me, which was telling me, saying, "Hey, look at yourself." So I think the very first thing is to listen to your own voice. Absolutely, absolutely needed.
Listen to your own voice and honor that
Yeah,
even in the
listen
face
to
of
it.
temptations.
Listen to it, because everything around us is designed to drown out that voice. It's literally like being in the matrix, right? So,
Yes.
and every day there will be all kinds of temptations that will come your way: the bigger salary, the comfortable house, the pat on the back from the boss, the parent, the wife, all of that. And
And now there's
the,
social media.
the social, yeah. So all that is will come your way. The second thing that after you have listened to that voice, it's not going to be easy to make a transition, of course, because um one of the things that becomes very important is that while you may change, your context is still the same. The stakeholders are still the same. So navigating and negotiating with the context is
Wow.
very, very important.
Put that in quotes. Absolutely.
And that's the second one, I would say. Uh, and the third thing is in all of this is to honor uh, the the help and the newness that comes your way,
Hmm.
because it will appear in, you know like you asked me, right, that how did people show up, and like how,
Yeah.
right, and just to notice, saying, hey, look, here's somebody who's shown up in my life to show me something. uh, can I just follow that rabbit hole and go down that and be curious and learn about it and say, maybe I will find something, right? So be that
Yeah.
openness to
I like
that.
that rabbit hole analogy. And, and also sometimes it's like a whisper, right? These tiny whispers, not very loud calls, but
Yeah,
take them,
it's
take
almost like a subtle flirtation, right? And to notice that flirtation and go behind it.
notice it. Yes, yes, that pull. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. This has been wonderful, Sanjay. And yeah, we will put more details on how you can find out more about Sanjay, his current work, the Take Two program, and how you can sign up for any of those opportunities. And we'll see you around. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ramya. Thanks for having me.
If you are someone who's looking to craft your life and work in a way that is more in line with your inner rhythm, then do visit my website, www.craftingourlives.com. You'll find it in the description, because I have a host of resources put together for you. And this is based on 20 years of my own research and work with people as a coach in this area. I also have a free newsletter, so your starting points should be to sign up for my newsletter, subscribe to this channel to stay updated for further videos, and to go on to the edX site and look for my free MOOC course there titled Crafting Realities, Work, Happiness and Meaning. And and then reach out to me if you need further assistance. I also offer private coaching, as well as I run group coaching sessions, and I also conduct residential retreats, and you can find all that information on my website or in the newsletter as and when we announce it.